Chapter 5. In the spring of Marra's 15th year at the convent, a fever went through the kingdom. It laid Marra low for many days, and when she struggled to her feet at last, it was to discover that the abbess was near death. For nearly a week it was touch and go. Because she had recovered, Marra was allowed to tend to older women. In truth, there was not much to be done except to sit in the room and practice her needlework and listen to the rattle of breathing, and would not be quite still. The abbess recovered, but there was white in her iron-grey hair, and she moved more cautiously than she had done. She needed a cane to go up the stairs, and it clearly infuriated her. The abbess had never been patient with her own weakness. Marra herself recovered well, though there were days when she only dozed at the window and could not will herself to move. Even the view of the window reminded her of plague. They lost 2 novices, and the old man who sold goat milk was replaced by his son, who told them quietly that his father would not be coming back. She was gazing out the window, not quite awake, thinking long, unraveling thoughts, when there was a tap on the door and the sister apothecary was waiting. "It's bad news," she said, holding out a letter. "The abbess asked me to bring it to you. She would have done it, but she can't handle the stairs. I don't know what it is, but it's not good." Marra broke the seal. If the sister had said anything else, she didn't hear. Her heart was pounding too hard in her ears. If the abbess had been informed of the contents, then it must be bad. It must be. "I regret to inform you that the fever took your niece, Virion. The funeral will be held as soon as the family can travel to the northern kingdom. If you are well enough to travel, a carriage will be sent to fetch you." "Oh," said Marra. She was horrified to find that the sensations she felt was relief. It was not her mother, not her sister, not her father. Her heart ached for Kanya's grief, but part of her said, "It is only a child. You saw for a few minutes at her christening and never again." And she hated herself for feeling that way, but the loss was at a remove, and her love was an abstract love, not one born of close familiarity. "My niece," she said, realizing the sister was waiting for an answer. "My niece has died of a fever. There's a funeral. I have to go. Someone should be told. I don't know what I would do next, but they're supposed to come and fetch me." Someone did. 2 days later, she was in a carriage traveling north. The horses were black, the bridles were black, the coachman clad in charcoal grey. The northern kingdom was showing off its wealth again, and Marra found herself crying not for her niece but for Damia. Late again, she thought. There was so many years ago. You're being slow again, only mourning. No. Probably you'll actually get around to crying for your niece in a decade or so, which was comforting in a foolish way, because maybe that meant that she was not a complete monster. She had been wondering since her first instinctive relief. She was met by a footman who led her to Kanya's chambers. It was all so much like the first time that she half expected Kanya to be in labor again. But her sister was not. She was standing at the window with her mother's arm around her, and the first thing that Marra saw was the roundness of her sister's belly. "You're pregnant again," she blurted. There had been other letters over the years announcing pregnancies, but never births. Eventually, they had stopped coming, and Marra had thought that perhaps Kanya had stopped trying. Perhaps she's only stopped telling people. Kanya and the Queen both looked at her. Kanya had blue circles around her eyes, and her face was solemn. But she was still so clearly his mother's daughter that it was like being studied by the Queen in her reflection. Marra managed a stammering apology, or perhaps it was only a stammer and Kanya took pity on her instead. "I am," she said. You, um, felicitations. I'm sure you must be very. Oh, hell. How can she be happy? She just lost her daughter, and the one that was already born. Marra looked around the room wildly, hoping that the right words would come, but they didn't. And eventually the silence stretched out so long that no words could have fixed it. The queen sighed, but Kanya gave a strangled laugh and came across the room to embrace Marra. I'm glad you're here, sister, she said. I'm sorry, said Marra miserably. I'm sorry for Vera and for you, or I'm so sorry. I'm not good at this. It's all right, said Kanya. I'm not either. She wiped her eyes and stepped back. Marra thought perhaps she wasn't very far along, but her clothes were cut to show her belly, or perhaps she was one of those women who began to show almost immediately. Can I do anything? Asked Marra. Anything at all? There's nothing to be done, said Kanya. Sit with me. The funeral's tomorrow. Marra nodded, and they sat at the window, and she tried not to say anything too horribly foolish, with the result that they mostly sat in silence. There was a family dinner that night. It was rained, and everyone picked at their food. There were too many courses, all of them far to reach, and the servants took them away again, barely tasted. Marra watched turtles go by, cooked in their shells, and quail stewed with apricots, and venison in lingonberry, and truffles and trifles, and wondered who in their right mind served such a thing to mourners. The old king was having a vague sort of day, intercut with moments of lucidity. Voling's smooth, handsome face was smoother and colder than Marra remembered. She wondered if he was beginning to age like the old king had. She had no idea how old he was. 40? 45? He did not look old. He did not look young. He looked like a carved marble. Kanya beside him was all too clearly fresh. Her wrists and ankles were swollen, and her skin was puffy. Marra wanted to grab her hands and beg her not to get pregnant again, to dump everything she learned about preventing conception into her sister's lap. She did not, because even she was not so far gone as to do that at dinner, particularly not with the husband who had brought her sister to give him sons. She fiddled with the stem of her wineglass and waited for the endless courses of food to just go away. Finally they did. The last plate was removed, and the king stood, and everyone else got to their feet as well. Tomorrow, said Vorling. His eyes flicked over Kanya. Clean yourself up for it. You look a fright. Marra inhaled sharply. Had he really said that? Had she misheard? Why was no one else reacting? That was shockingly cruel. She couldn't have heard it. She glanced at her mother's face, seeking confirmation, but the queen's face was utterly calm, and same calm that she wore when speaking to enemies and diplomats. The two attendants who helped the king began to lead the monarch greatly towards the door, and Vorling followed. I would like to stand vigil to my daughter tonight, said Kanya in Vorling's back. And the Shabo. Vorling turned. Marra saw his lips thin, saw them start to form a denial, but the old king looked at her and smiled blearily and said, Yes, yes, right and proper. Rage flashed across Vorling's face. It was so strange and unexpected that Marra almost did not realize it. For a moment she thought the prince was in pain or about to have some kind of fit. Then it passed and his face resumed that flat, smooth tranquility. I will send guards, he said. I would prefer to keep vigil alone, said Kanya. Her voice shook a little, as if she was asking for some enormous favor. I will take my sister with me for comfort. Warling's face turned toward Marra. There was something mask-like about his expression, and Marra wanted to take a step back. But Kanya was also looking at her, and so was the old king. Yes, of course, she murmured, folding her hands inside her sleeves. I would be honored. You must keep a guard, said Warling. I must mourn, she said. A nun is chaperone enough, I think. Marra wanted to say that she was not really a nun, but she knew that her sister knew that, and if her sister thought it was important enough to lie, she would not be the one to expose her. A tear slid down the old king's face and he wiped it away. His wispy hair seemed to float as he nodded. It's proper, he said. He nudged his son's shoulder. You have to let the ladies wave their own way. Rolling's lips tightened over his teeth. My guards will escort you, he said in a clipped voice, and he turned on his heel and walked away. The guards came for Marra that night after dinner. She had sent the maid away and was staring at the tapestries in her room, pacing from one to another. She mostly showed treaties being signed and were remarkably tedious, but she had to admire the craftsmanship that suggested writing on pages without actually spelling out the letters. This is a fair bit of design. I wonder if I could do that. One of the tapestries billowed in a draught, perhaps from the palace of dust underfoot. Tomorrow her niece would join to the ancient kings. It seemed like a cold and lonely place to send a child. Someone knocked on the door, and then opened it immediately. 2 guards came in, wearing the white clothes of the prince's personal guard. You are sent for, said the taller of the 2. Marra nodded. It occurred to her somewhat belatedly that the guards might address a princess with a little more respect, but here in this place built on dead kings, perhaps there was no great worth to a princess. She walked behind them, her head bowed, and concentrated on looking as much like a nun as she could. Lady of Crackles, forgive me for this deception. It seems like it must be important. The chapel where her niece's body lay in state seemed larger at the night, with the candles flickering and the shadows looming in the corners. Kanya stood just inside the door, her face blank, as if she had stepped away from her own face for a little while and retreated somewhere deep inside. There were 2 more guards with her, also clad in white. The 4 of them went through the chapel, looking in each pew and each shadow. It struck Marra almost a parody of watchfulness. There were no places to hide in the chapel. Were they trying to impress her with their care? Seeking assassins under the pews? She was half surprised that they did not look inside the closed sarcophagus, but they left it alone. When they had scoured the room, the leaders of the 4 nodded curtly to Kanya, and they left the chapel. Marra heard a bar grinding into a socket as they were locked inside. That was thorough, she murmured. Kanya snorted. The prince fears that I keep lovers under my bush, she said. If the king had not thought that it was sweet, she rolled the word on her tongue and spat it out with scorn. I would not have been allowed even this much solitude. Oh, said Marra faintly. She swallowed. Kanya? Keeping lovers? She understood all the words, but they did not seem to line up in her head. Oh. They knelt together at the rail before the coffin. Kanya settled heavily, her belly swollen against her legs. Marra wanted to tell her that it was true in many pregnancies. Ask her if she knew about the ways to stop from conceiving, but how could you do that in a room with a dead child? Instead, she bowed her head and tried to pray. Our Lady of Crackles, please, please. She could not think of anything to pray for. What did you ask for when a child was dead? Please make this as easy on my sister as you can, she thought finally. That seemed like the only thing worth asking for. She stared at the stone coffin, thought again of how she had felt relief that it was only her niece who had died. Shame washed through her. She dropped her eyes to her hands. You learned to play in the convent, said Kanya quietly. I suppose, Marra said. Mostly I learned about ways to weave and embroider, and how to shovel the stable, and lately how to deliver a baby. She glanced over at Kanya, wondering if this was an opening, but her sister said nothing. They continued to kneel. The candles burned down slowly, a drop of wax sliding down the pale pillars. After what seemed like an hour, Kanya said, My daughter in this coffin, and I do not feel anything. She gazed at the small sarcophagus, dry-eyed. Did your convent teach you what to do about that? Marra swallowed hard and shook her head. They took her from me as soon as she was born. Remember? I did not hold her, not even for a moment. They took her to her father, and then to the wet nurse. She had an army of nursemaids and tutors. I saw her for a few minutes a day at most. She shook her head slowly. There were so many things I missed, I did not even know that I missed them. I took her first step and spoke her first words, and I heard from the nursemaids. Perhaps you moaned then, said Marra, hoping desperately that it was true. I didn't moan her either, and now it seems like no one is, not really, and that's not right. Perhaps, but I should be mourning now, Kanya said, sounding thoughtful. I should be destroyed. This should be the greatest pain that a mother could know, and yet it is as if a stranger's child has died. I feel barely for that stranger, but it does not seem as if it is to do anything with me. I'm sorry, croaked Marra. A Lady of Crackles, please tell me what to say. A Lady of Crackles, please fix this because I can't. I'm too. Kanya shifted her pregnant bulk, grimacing. She put a hand to the small of her back and winced, then stretched her arms along the prairie. They took my daughter, and now they have taken even my ability to mourn her. The children I lost before they was born, they felt more real than this. It would have been an opening to talk to her about the lost pregnancies. It would have been the time, but Marra's gaze was transfixed on her sister's wrist, on a line of livid purple marks there. She held out her hand, trembling a little, and the marks matched the fingerprints. A man's hand, larger than hers, but fingerprints nonetheless. Kanya, she said hoarsely. Kanya looked down at her arm and pulled the sleeves to hide the marks. Ah, she said. For those? How did you? Her throat closed up. They could not be what it looked like. It was an accident. Surely it was an accident. She fell and he caught her. Normally he is careful not to leave them where they show, said Kanya in a voice so weary that the carvings on the walls should have come to life and wept. But since I'm pregnant, his ability is limited, and he is very angry that I would keep a vigil alone. Marra stared at her. The words fell into her like stones into a well, and she could not hear them rattling down her mind. But they did not seem to make any sense. They could not possibly make sense. She had to stop and swallow. Her throat was suddenly dry. He hurts you? Kanya gave her one of those quick, sharp looks she remembered from childhood, when she had been too slow to realize something. It was the same look that she had worn when Marra had refused to believe Damia was dead. Marra flinched back as if it were a blow. Of course he does, said Kanya. Though he mostly stops when I'm pregnant. He does not want any more miscarriages. He gets them anyway. She smiled sourly. Although it's not much of a respite, because he saves up a great deal of anger in those months. You'd think he had have horse to take it out on, but the man's got a horror of bastards and bastardy, so it's me or nothing. The prince, said Marra, feeling as if she were still half a step behind the conversation. The prince is doing this. Kanya gave her another sharp look. Of course, who else? But someone has to stop him, said Marra. The king or... She trailed off because who could stop Prince? Did you call the guard on them? You couldn't do that, could you? The king is in his dotage, said Kanya. You saw. He shows up at ceremonies and mumbles and waves, and then goes back to bed. Vorling is the true ruler here. Has been for years. How long has this been going on? Whispered Marra. Since the beginning. Oh. Marra sorrowed. No king, no guards, no help. Come home then. Leave him and come home where he can't get you. Kanya's look was almost pitying. And he will declare war on our country for breach of contract. Do you think I haven't asked? I haven't even been allowed to home for a visit. I told you he is terrified of bastards. It goes both ways. If I'm allowed out of his sight for a day, he's sure that I'll be pregnant by some other one. He tells me he'll have no bastard on the throne. It's the spell, you know. The godmother's blessing, no enemies shall take the throne, but only as long as the bloodline continues. A bastard on the throne means the northern kingdom falls, or so he believes. Each word rang out ugly like the chop of an axe into hard wood. Marra shook her head slowly. It was baffling, appalling. It made no sense, but you wouldn't do that. Kanya gave a short, hoarse laugh. In a heartbeat, she whispered, dropping her voice. In an instant, if I thought I could have a child that did not carry that monster's blood. Marra stared at the coffin because she could not look at her sister's eyes any longer. He was away on a military campaign early on, said Kanya. It lasted for years. When he came back, he would not touch me for 9 months. To be sure, he said. To be absolutely sure. She gave another hoarse laugh. Those were the best years of my marriage, except that I was still young and fool enough to think that he might change. Marra took a deep breath. Then you must kill him, she said, her own voice barely above a whisper. Could the guards on the door hear her? She dropped it even lower. Stab him when he's asleep. Kanya looked at her with pity and despair. He does not sleep with me. Then, when he, Marra felt herself turning bright scarlet. Kanya's face softened as she looked at her sister. Her guards are with him, even then, she said very gently. I think it excites him to know they watch. The whole world seemed to slow sideways. Marra had never thought, never even dreamed. Oh, she said. She couldn't deal with that. There was no place in her head to put that piece of information. She tried to think of something else, something that would fix things. Kanya sat in silence, her hands folded, looking at the coffin of the daughter she had not been allowed to love. If you had an heir, said Marra, If you bore him in air, would he let go? You'd go away, somewhere else, a separate estate, or go back home. Something. He wouldn't need you anymore. He would not need me anymore, agreed his sister. And the moment he does not need me, the moment that he has a son that will rule both of our kingdom and his, then my life will be worth less than the lowest peasant. I will not die quickly, but I will die. Then you can't have any more children, said Marra hopelessly. Her mind was full of horses and bridles and funeral procession of mourners. The wrapped body that must be Damia's. You can't. One could be a boy. And if she does not bear children, she will no longer be useful to him. He will kill her and marry the next sister in line to get that son. The next sister. Kanya gazed at her steadily, and Marra realized that her knowledge must be written across her face. You see how it must be, said Kanya softly. If there is a way out, I cannot find it. She drew herself up, every inch a queen. But I endure for the sake of our people. I will endure. The next 3 days were nauseating in the dullness of the horror. Marra did not dare speak to anyone about what she learned. The prince would hear, he must. Kanya had not dared to speak of it except in the shape of her sister and the body of her daughter. I do not dare speak it to anyone. He will know. He will know. But just as there was no speaking, there was no way to stop thinking about it. There were no moment, waking or sleeping, when it was not burning in Marra's brain. She choked down dry toast and dreamed about the marks on Kanya's arms, and only mercy was that everyone took her horror for grief. Her niece's coffin was interred in the crypts below the palace. All Marra could remember was great iron doors opening and then a procession through a maze of cold stone corridors. She walked behind Kanya with her hands tucked into her sleeves and watched Falling's face and realized that she had never hated before now. This must be what this new feeling was. It took up so much space in her chest that she did not know if she could breathe around it. When she and her mother left in the northern kingdom, relief took her so strongly that it felt like joy, as if she might fling herself out of the carriage and dance on the road. I cannot be relieved. Kanya is still trapped. I was never the one in danger. I do not deserve to feel this way. But she felt it anyway, and the shame of it struck her in the waves. But when they ebbed, the wild joy of being away from Walling's palace was still there. She stayed only one night in her father's palace. Her old room was still kept for her. Even a small poor kingdom can usually afford to keep a princess's room for her. It was much too young, filled with stuffed toys, and Marra was 30 years old now. But I can hardly ask them to change it, for a room I only use one night in a decade. That would be wasteful. The abbess would have looked down her nose at the extravagance, which might have gone to feed the poor, and the sister apothecary would have shaken her head and laughed. There was only one thing she could do, though. In her father's house, and the one thing only. Marra took her courage in both hands. It had not occurred to her that the living as a nun might have robbed of her bravery, and yet facing her mother seemed far more alarming than it ever had when she was a child. She was too aware that the other woman was the queen first and her mother second, and that Marra herself was a small, insignificant piece in the game. I need to talk to you, she said, when her mother looked up at her. Your Majesty? Mother, please. Well, that was even worse than I expected, she thought. She had never been terribly clear with words, but apparently she had lost what little skill she had ever possessed. A line formed between the queen's eyebrows. Leave us, she commanded to the waiting women, and they filed out, glancing curiously back over their shoulders. Kanya's in trouble, said Marra. As soon as the door closed behind them, the queen cocked her head to one side. How so? It's the prince. Marra swallowed. Her throat felt very dry. She's listening, that's something. Prince Warling, she's scared. She's very scared. I'm pretty sure she could not say the words. They were right there in her head. He's hurting her. And yet she could not seem to get them out. I can't say it. Why can't I say it? It felt as if she were about to say something horrible and shameful. Her throat wanted to close up to prevent her from saying such awful things, even if they were true. Even if it wasn't Kanya's fault, it was Warling. But for some reason, even just saying the word seemed impossible. She swallowed. Her face felt hot. Say it. Say it. She thought of the line of the violet fingerprints again and tried to focus. Why was this so hard? Kanya hadn't asked for her help, but she had to get the words out. Their mother would fix it. The queen fixed things. It was why their father had married her. She understood politics and expediency, and she would fix it somehow. He's doing... Marra took a deep breath. Say it. You have to say it. He's hurting her. There were marks. We have to get her away. Ah, said the queen. Does she believe me? What if she doesn't believe me? All the memories of childhood read up in her head, all the childish lies. Kanya saying that she was just jealous because she didn't have a prince. Oh, Lady of Grackles. What do I do? Do I drag her back to the northern kingdom and show her Kanya's arms with marks? The thought was absolutely shattering. She watched as the queen bent her head over the bit of embroidery in her hands. Marra could identify the stitch from where she stood, a crane fly knot, and thought she would have done it better and more neatly. That gave her a tiny shred of courage, and that she was more skilled at something than the queen, and she had so little courage left. Prince Warling is a monster, said the queen crisply. He is undoubtedly hurting her in all manner of ways, although he has learned not to do anything that might cause a miscarriage. We shall hope the next child is a son, so the assistant has some chance of retiring from his immediate action. Marra's mouth hung open, but there were no words in her throat. But he won't let her go. He'll kill her then. Until she has a son, however, she is at his mercy, and so are we. But, croaked Marra, the queen yanked the needle through the fabric in an impatient flick. Think, Marra, we are a very small kingdom, and his knife is at our throat. If the protection of the northern kingdom is withdrawn, then the southern kingdom marches on us to seize our harbor. But they didn't before. Marra felt as if she was stumbling through the steps of a dance that was far more intricate than she had believed. They did not, because the northern kingdom would have stopped them, if not for our sakes, so that the south did not control the harbor. But if the northern kingdom let it be publicly known that we had fallen out of favor and they were no longer interested in defending us, then we will have southern troops surrounding the castle in a fortnight. Marra tried to imagine the fields around the castle sprouting with tents and swords and pikes and could not. Another stab of the needle in the cloth. The stitch would be too tight and would pucker the fabric. Or, said her mother, if we defy Warling before he has an heir that might conceivably inherit our throne, he well might decide to march on us himself and raze this entire city to the ground in a single bloody day. Marra swallowed. But Kanya is threading a very dangerous needle right now. Did she ask you to get her out? No. Marra felt as if she was standing a few paces behind herself, completely outside the world that could be so strange and cruel and complicated. No. The queen nodded. She wanted to say so much more. She wanted to say that Kanya thought a son would be the death of her, But maybe Kanya was wrong, or perhaps the queen was wrong, or perhaps everyone was wrong and nothing could be made right. But another thought of beating at her skull like a moth against the window pane. Did you know? Asked Marra. Before? I knew that he had questionable appetites, said the queen. There was nothing in her face or her tone that asked forgiveness. I'd hoped he was wise enough to keep them quiet. I did not think he would be a fool enough to torment his wife to miscarriage and death. She shook her head, her lips a grim line. Death. But it took far too long before it finally occurred to Marra that her mother was talking about Damien, not Kanya. Oh. Oh, so he did kill her. And Mother knew. She did not know how to feel. It was too huge, too strange. She did not know if she wanted to weep or rage or throw herself from the castle wall. There was nothing in her heart or her history that told her what to do with this knowledge. This was too big. She had to shove it aside and focus on Kanya, or else she would be lost completely. She could get her way, said Marra hopelessly. She could come and stay with me. Take orders with the sisters. He couldn't get her then. Marra, said the queen, her voice softening. Marra, love, do you think a man who tortures his wife or would wipe out the kingdom on a wing would be stopped by an abbey's walls? She was still standing too far back from herself. Trapped in amber, she watched herself bow her head and say, No, of course not. The fury rising inside her was doused at once. Her mother had known, and she had also known that there was nothing she could do. It was too late. Perhaps it has been too late since Vorling came courting Damien many years before. Don't let her drag you into this hell along with us, Kanya had said, her eyes dull with agony, clutching at her sister's robes, who ran away. The knowledge bloomed inside her blood, soaking through a bandage. Prince Vorling had picked a tiny, vulnerable kingdom who could not fight back. He had done it deliberately. He had married their daughters, knowing that he could torment them at a will, and they would have to take whatever he gave to keep their people safe. Oh, don't do anything foolish, said the queen. Don't talk to anyone about this. If words get back to the prince, it will go badly for your sister. She set her embroidery aside. I don't talk about it either, for the same reason. Was she alright? Asked Marra. She knew that the answer was no, but wanted the queen to comfort her, to tell her that everything would come out for the best, the way that she had when Marra was very young. She's managed this long, said the queen. She's riding a dragon, and all of us in the kingdom are riding along with